Okay, we missed everything. Okay, what were we just talking about? Oh, Anita. Yeah, we don't know why I want credit. She's the ASFPM credit queen. Credit queen. Oh, thank you. Hi, good idea.
Okay, so this is our regular plug for the VFMA. It was really great to meet a bunch of you a couple weeks ago at the conference in Richmond. I'm not sure if everybody that was in the room here attended the conference, but it was a lot of great information, a great opportunity to network, and we really strongly encourage you to consider joining the VFMA if you're not already. There were some award recipients who are in the room with us today. We're lucky to have Ken Somerset and Tom accepted Accomack County's CRS Community of the Year Award. Dannon O'Connell was the Floodplain Manager of the Year. Kristen Owen with Henrico County received the Distinguished Service Award. She is great, led a lot of good talks at the conference as well. I really enjoyed her elevation certificate training. For the city of Roanoke, their Revitalizing Lake Run project received Flood Mitigation Project of the Year. And then, as I said, Ken, he received the Longevity Appreciation Award. So when we put out the call for this meeting, the agenda yesterday, Whitney McNamara with the city of Virginia Beach sent in this question. Please take some time to read over her thoughts, and Whitney, if you would like to chime into the group and let them know a little bit more about what you're thinking. I think this is a great question.
Yeah, sure. So I'm trying to kind of pull like what everyone is seeing as charges for elevation certificates, because like ours were running around 300 pre-COVID. And then after COVID, we had a couple of surveyors that retired, and like cost of elevation certificates skyrocketed in addition to delay and time to get them out. So, I mean, it's taking like 3+ weeks now to get an elevation certificate, which is really starting to hold building projects up. And costs have gone up like between, I would say 500 to 900 is on average. And what I'm seeing is they're charging that every time we ask for one. So if we ask for an elevation certificate, say someone's putting an addition on their house and they don't have an existing elevation certificate, we ask for one before we issue the permit so we can figure out if they can set the floor in the addition at the existing finished floor height or if it needs to be elevated. But then they're being charged, $500, $900 for that first elevation certificate. I've been skipping doing a foundation on those projects, just due to the cost of the elevation certificates, especially if we know they can match the existing finished floor height, and then requiring the final elevation certificate. And these are for like non-substantial improvements. So, I mean, it might be a $10,000 addition. So when they're being charged an extra $1,000 on their project, people are starting to just kind of question why we're requiring all of them, and basically saying that, hey, that extra $1,000 is kind of making this project that was supposed to be a quick small addition unaffordable. So one thing that I talked to like several people at the VFMA conference, and one thing that came up was potentially developing like a locality specific form that doesn't require as much data, but would give us the information we needed to verify floor height, and like on the final, if vents were needed for things that aren't substantial improvements or new construction. So things that we don't need the official elevation certificate for CRS, but where we need something for our records. And then, working with the surveyors to figure out what we could develop that they could offer for a much cheaper rate. So I just kind of wanted to throw it out there, see what everyone else was seeing for elevation certificate costs. And if anyone knows of anyone that's done something like this in another community, or if your community's done something similar. Just trying to make sure that I'm not overburdening the homeowners with requiring all of these elevation certificates.
Anyone in the room want to speak? We can move over a microphone or Ken.
Whitney, in Pocosin, we require an elevation certificate or confirmation of elevation of the first floor for, if it's gonna be an addition or something like that, for improvements like you're talking about, that won't require all the information that the elevation certificate has. I will accept a simple letter from the surveyor or a surveyor asking, tell me what the finished floor is and the vital information I need, so they don't have to, spend as much, to help the citizen, not have to pay as much like they're talking about. So, I mean, it can be done.
Yeah,
The biggest thing is making sure you get, you know what the finished floor is.
exactly. Now, do you still require pictures with that? Because I think, like, talking to a couple of the surveyors, their sticking point was when they had to start submitting pictures.
Yeah, what we ran into is depending on the surveyor. Some we're seeing anywhere from $450 to $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on which surveyor you talk to is how they, some of them are, I'm not going to do a simple letter. I'm going to do it. I'm doing the whole thing. It's their way of generating more money.
Yeah.
And we try to explain to them, but if you come in, do a simpler version for them at a cheaper price, you don't get, more volume out of it, because we'll be able to recommend you to the citizen saying, they'll talk to this specific company and they'll do it for, a reduced price. So it is possible to do it.
Yeah.
Kristen has her hand raised, would like to chime in as well. Kristen, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so Whitney, we're seeing actually even more expensive elevation certificates. Ours are $1,000 or more now for one. And we've been struggling with this because we require 3 elevation certificates. And so I just did an elevation certificate training for our local surveyors and some of the engineers that do work in Henrico. And I kind of pushed back on them and told them that they need to help figure this out. And the problem that they've said is that for the larger companies, it's the larger companies that can't really make it work. And so that's why they're charging so much, because they need to be able to cover the cost of overhead and everything. But there are some smaller survey company, just an individual that has their own company that has been able to do it and can charge cheaper prices. So I asked them, and several of the members that were there are part of the Association of Surveyors in leadership positions. And so I asked them, can you all go back and talk to your membership and figure out between yourselves who's doing this, what prices are you charging? And if it's not doable for the surveyors at these bigger companies, who honestly, from talking to them, don't even want to do it. If they can start recommending these other people and pushing the property owners that need them to these smaller firms where it can be cheaper. So they said that they would talk about it. I haven't followed up with them. That was at the end of September. The other thing I asked them was, and I tell all of our applicants to ask this question when they talk to the surveyors, is can they quote them on a bundle? So we know from the beginning they have to get 2 or 3 elevation certificates. And once they go out and do most of the measurements, they're not really changing a lot on the farm. They're just changing a couple things. And so it the bulk of the work is done once they do the first one. And so we asked them to do that too. If there was a way they could give them a bundle price that would make it a little bit cheaper and work with them for how they do it, instead of people having to go find a surveyor for each one. So I don't know if they're going to be willing to do that or not, but we've been asking that question. We haven't thought of doing our own form yet, although we have in a couple instances I don't really like that we did it, but in a couple instances when people complained, we actually had the county surveyor do their form for them and for free, which, you know, presents a whole lot of problems, but figuring that out as a potential option. And then I don't know if you talked to Chesterfield, but Chesterfield has their own local like elevation form. I don't know how they use it and I don't know how much it costs for people to fill it out, but they're the only one that I really know of that has their own form that they've been using for a while.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I do recommend, like, if someone calls me and asks them, like, you know, or if I'm talking to them early in the process, I'm like, you're gonna need 2 or you're gonna need 3. Make sure you're asking to bundle. And I mean, we have a very small handful that I routinely see as names coming in, like probably about 5. And one, like, they're all basically individuals except for one who works with a planning and design firm, but they're doing like entire site design, site plan, like the elevation certificate is just kind of like an add-on to everything else they're doing for the big project. So yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll also add, so I asked, we have Atkins as one of our consultants. So like Becca Croft, who does the FEMA elevation certificate trainings, is one of our consultants. So I actually asked them the other day about this too. You know, like what if this seems really high, because it seems high for Virginia and people are obviously, you know, very concerned about it. They said that they've been seeing elevation certificates at 2,000 to 3,000 and that it's been that way for a while. So they were kind of shocked that we were upset about it being like 1,000. So that was a little concerning that it's like 2 or 3 times as high in other places.
Yeah, I mean, like, I understand it when you're doing a new construction or a substantial improvement, when you're making, you know, 100, 200, 300 plus $1,000 investment. But when I'm requiring them on these little projects and it's adding 10% to the project cost, or it's like we're converting a screened in porch to a sunroom and they're literally spending 3,000 to 5,000. And I'm like, yeah, I need 2 elevation certificates. They're like, I can't afford my project anymore. Like, you know, I've been saving to do this project and now I can't do it.
Yeah,
So
I have to look at our ordinance again, because I think the way our ordinance is written is that the one is required with a permit. And then our ordinance says for new buildings, it's required for the low floor and like final construction. We were requiring it for all of them, but I think we've kind of stopped now because of this issue. And then the one with the permit is based on drawings, so like it should be cheaper anyway because they're not measuring as much. But from my conversation with the surveyors, the problem is like they have to go out and benchmark everything, and so they have to do that no matter what. Like that's the hard, like the most time consuming part is being able to do it, and they have to do that no matter what, like no matter what form they fill out. And so I don't know if that, like, I want to talk to our county surveyor too about it, because we have a bunch of county benchmarks that aren't necessarily on like the federal list. And just like, you know, maybe it's a matter of we need to get more so that it's easier for them to do it. I don't know. But yeah, I think we should definitely talk about it. I'll follow up with the VAS folks too and see if they've had any conversations about it and if they can push it a little bit more if they haven't.
Awesome. Yeah. Also, while we're on the topic of elevation certificates and benchmarks, I had an issue come up about a year ago now where the builder changed companies in the process between like 2 of their elevation certificates. And one company was using GPS and one company was going off benchmarks. And the one that was going off of GPS was like a foot too low when they submitted the elevation certificate. So another thing, like, you know, as you're seeing elevation certificates come in, if something looks off, make sure they're using the same method to shoot their elevations between certificates if they're changing companies, because we're seeing large discrepancies.
Yeah, that's a big difference. Foot, that really stinks for that property owner contractor. So thank you for everybody who participated in the poll. It looks like we have a strong majority in favor of exploring that option further. We'll definitely bring that up again. For anybody who's joining late, please go ahead and put your introduction in the chat, just so we can make sure that we're getting your attendance logged too. So we're gonna just plug Emily Schmidt, the ISO CRS specialist for Virginia. Emily, we're really glad that you're on the call. Did you have anything that you would like to speak to the group about today?
Hi, everyone. I just really wanted to say thanks for being able to meet everybody at the conference a couple weeks ago, and to let you know that if you have questions about your class level or questions about the program, or want to set up a one-on-one couple hours conversation about going through your program, please reach out to me and we can set up a time for that technical assistance visit conversation. But it was really great to meet everybody, and I'm very excited for new folks to come in. So hopefully we can get some of your neighbors involved in the program as well, get them interested.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
And this is just a standing reminder that if your CRS coordinator changes, please let ISO know so that they can keep you up to date as you're moving through your recertifications and cycle visits. So this is what is coming up next year. If anybody's not on the list, please let me know. And again, congratulations to Warren County and Enrico Kristen on joining the CRS. And we're looking forward to hearing from Ken an update on COSIN's full cycle visit that happened earlier this month.
I had a question. Does anybody know the Warren County floodplain CRS person?
Yeah, it's Chief Lens. Oh, and that
I do, Mary Carson. I can message you his info.
Well, Savannah's just saying, yes, she knows.
Oh.
We
we did reach out to them and congratulated them, and unfortunately, both the CRS coordinator and planning director had a conflict this morning, but they're looking forward to joining us in future months.
Savannah's on it.
Ken, did you want to speak really briefly to how your cycle visit went?
We had our visit actually a day after the conference was over, which was really wonderful. I've been doing CRS work, floodplain management, et cetera, for over 35 years in 3 communities and worked with 4 CRS specialists. And I want to say thank you to Miss Emily for the unbelievable work she did with us. We sat down, we went through things and looked at everything that we were doing, things that we had talked about doing and upgrades we had made. And then she took the time to, to go through the things where we could really benefit from additional work to maximize all of our points. And the reason I say that is because she is the best advocate, is unbelievably good at what she does, is willing to stand up and help you get the things you need. Some of the things that we did, we took and revised our ordinance, and I would encourage everybody to look at your ordinance, your flood ordinance, and make sure that you've got the basic things in it that are required in the building code. For example, in the building code requires all communities to enforce the coastal A zone. We know it as the Limois area. So, and to enforce 1 foot of freeboard from mechanical equipment to above BFE. So those are basics that you've got to be doing anyway if you're in Virginia. So take those basics and put them into language. We had been doing them for several years now. We just never had put them into words. So we did, and that was a big higher standards for us. We also took our, in doing that, we took our cumulative loss scale, and we made it to a 10-year cumulative loss as far as following what needs to be done. We went from 50% down to 45% for the threshold to improvements, elevations, et cetera, which really isn't a lot, but it is a lot when we go from that to the higher standard. So there's a lot of really simple things you can do to get to those points, that look for them and and incorporate them into your language, and then look at the things you're already doing. Are you getting information out to specific groups, or to in our case, it's the entire community we've designated as repetitive loss? Makes it easy for us. If you have certain areas, make sure you get those letters out to them, the information out to them, and do it more than just once a year, and you'll get maximum points as often as possible. But again, we had a really good conversation with Emily. Before I knew it, the day over half gone, and we were just moving right along. She's going to give you a lot of really, really good information that's going to help you. And then she'll also she'll question you on a lot of things. And the reason she'll do that is to say, I want to make sure I understand everything that you're doing, and things that we were doing that we didn't think about. She was asking more detailed questions for information so that she could maximize the points that were available to us. And then there was a couple of times she said, I want to make sure I understand what you're doing so that I can argue for you when I have to, when I turn this in. Again, some of the simpler things with making sure you have the pre-disaster or pre-event coordination for picking up debris, making sure that you have your utilities department or whoever's in charge of checking for drainage ways, ditches, et cetera, pre and post event inspections to make sure things are done and kept clean, to try to keep those. And those are simple things that other departments are doing. Stormwater management, give with the appropriate departments and make sure they are understanding what they need to do. The last thing I would strongly encourage everybody to do is, especially with the new elevation certificates, make sure that when you get them, have that checklist or have something in place so that you can go through it and make sure everything is where it's supposed to be and all the numbers are correct, and then have somebody else follow up on that. That's something that we started doing. Unfortunately, Emily found too that we have to, we're working with the contractor to get revised right now, but you just want to make sure that you have those, all those correct. And then also, we got additional points from having additional staff go to the L273 class. So if you have other people do it, the more people you can get that will take those classes and that training, get those certifications or get those certificates in, then that's again simple, quick, easy additional points you can get. We are hoping to get to a class 7. We think, and that was our goal ultimately. And then if we can get a 6, which would be unbelievable for us. Our BCS score is not that high, and I'm not sure it will ever be that good. But Emily will definitely work with you to find as many points as she can, and to to help you get where you need to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. All great advice. It's great to hear that your cycle visit went well. Was it a 3-year or a 5-year visit?
I'm sorry?
Was it a 5-year cycle visit?
So I have a couple questions. Is that okay? So the 45%, that's a change.
Right.
But you did not have 50% first, right?
Well, we kept the standard at 50%. Yes.
But I mean, sorry, over a 10-year period.
Right.
That was new.
Right. We dropped it from 50 to 45% for damage, and we added the 10-year cumulative for all permits to be added.
Right. So in Virginia, y'all have that which is new. Norfolk just adopted it. I forget when that would have been, whoever is here from Norfolk. You have 50%, 10 years, is that correct? Or is it fewer than 10 years? I kind of feel like it might be fewer. Anybody here from Norfolk? Calling them out.
Do you recognize any names?
Not yet. Alyssa,
Can you repeat what you said? Sorry, I'm confused.
your cumulative substantial improvement requirements at the city,
Mm-hmm.
what are they?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, well, if you could find out, that would be really helpful, because at the VFMA conference, there was discussion about who has cumulative substantial improvement provisions and who doesn't. Or no, they didn't talk about who does, everybody else doesn't, who does. And it was shocking to me. I feel like this is something that we've talked about and we've tried to track, but somehow it's slipped past me that localities are really doing this. And so Norfolk was listed. I don't know if y'all were listed because it's new, but we would really like to track who is doing this in the, in Virginia. I think there's one Northern Virginia community that we did know about. But we'd like to track it. We'd like to put it on the website so that people could borrow the language as needed. I think it's going to become more popular as the substantial damage team is set up. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a bit. Y'all don't have that, do you, Newport News?
No, we're still trying to figure out how to do it.
How to do
The
it.
cumulative, the time span is something we need to handle down.
Yes.
Yeah, and then just, using our whatever software packages we're using.
Still kind of feeling our way.
Because it's not us doing that, that would be different.
Our codes.
It's not like Ken doing it.
Yeah,
Right.
yes, it's convincing the other departments to do.
With a big,
Ours
large team.
is set up is, to our permitting system.
Yeah.
They were, have no idea what they did or how they're doing it, but they've set it up so
And
that
it's.
it would automatically.
Good, it's just,
Right.
We'd have to have, I guess, you just pick the date and from here forward,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah, that's when we did it with our ordinance, the day the ordinance was adopted, then from then on, we're counting 10 years from then. It was a simple thing. It's one of those things that, in Potosin, council is very conservative on doing anything extra. So while I was in the process of going through the ordinance and saying we're already doing these things through the state code, through the building code, I just snuck those two in and didn't say anything to them, and they seemed to be happy with it.
So
Yeah, they recorded it now. I still have a job, so I'm happy.
They were like, our ISO was like, okay, well, it's in the building code, you're doing it. And so we didn't have to have it in our ordinance.
Right, and then that's when we first looked at it, the last time we had a review. We said, well, we're doing these things. They said, good, you're doing what the building code says. But then when we talked to Emily last year, she said, do you have this in language in your flood ordinance? I said, no. She said, put it in language. Now you get that higher standard by having it in your actual physical language. And it really worked well. The other thing I wanted to mention too, that Emily had brought up was, if we need to go back and do ours, is adding, ICC language in your ordinance. I didn't realize that if you add the increased cost of compliance language in there, how somebody can get it and what they need to go through, that, those are additional points also. And simple little things to, a lot of stuff we found were simple, basic things to do. Weren't going to cost us a whole lot of money and, some staff time and redoing our GIS maps and, really worked well.
Can we ask though, on the call, who else is doing 10-year cumulative substantial improvement and damage tracking?
Or cumulative to any time period.
Yeah, sorry, exactly, any time period.
James City County does.
Is that Michael?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what do y'all do?
We just have a spreadsheet. We haven't tied it to our property information system yet. Going forward, we probably ought to, and so to handle turnover issues. But like I said, right now we just, because our group has been fairly stable, we just keep track of it with a spreadsheet.
And is it 10 years, 50%?
It is 10 years and 50%.
Okay, that's great.
That's one of the things we did was, took other communities, what somebody else was doing. And said, this is what James City County has done. This is what Hampton is doing. This is, Accomack just did this. So we use those things as a motivational tool to, say, look, we're kind of lagging behind. We need to catch up with everybody. So that, things like that get the powers to be, wanting to be, to improve a little bit. And it's a good thing.
I'm gonna ask one more question, just to see if there are broad consistencies. What permit software for tracking do you use? Do you know?
Ours is Energov,
Intergov?
or is
Okay, is anybody else on the call also on Intergov? Or if not, can you drop in the chat what other permit tracking software you use in your locality? Thank you.
So James,
Ken, I got a question for you. So
Yes, sir.
if you're using 10 years cumulative, somebody comes in for an addition to a house, do you then make them aware of that? Like, do you have that discussion and say, listen, if you come back in 5 years and add another addition, you're then going to be substantially improving the structure and you're going to have to raise it.
Well, yeah, we
conversation.
want to let them know as much information as possible. But when we're doing that, we're also trying to give them all the reasons, all the positives why.
Right.
So yeah, we try to make sure they understand that.
for Emily or Ken, you were talking about adding the ICC language. What element was that? Or does Emily know what element that was?
Yeah, that is under cumulative substantial improvements 3. So it's in activity 430. It's in the element for cumulative substantial improvement. And then that is broken out into 4 sub-elements. The first one is for cumulative accounting for improvements, modifications, and additions for 5 or 10 years. CSI 2 is that same cumulative for 5 or 10 years for reconstructing or repairs from damages. So usually those go hand in hand. Just make sure your language has it for both substantial improvements and substantial damages, right? Looking at that cumulative. CSI 3 is if the community adopts regulatory language that qualifies properties for increased cost of compliance insurance coverage for repetitive losses.
Thank you.
And CSI 4, just to round out that activity, is for if you have regulations that require any addition to a building to be protected from that base flood. So basically, if an addition is treated as new construction, that is CSI 4. These are all broken out on pages 430-18 and 430-19 in the manual.
Thank you, Emily. And could you speak really quickly to the total number of credits available in those elements?
Absolutely. So a combination of those elements cannot exceed 90 points, 90. And then that would be impact adjusted as to how much of your special flood hazard area is developable. So if you have 80% preserved as open space, you're not going to get a lot of points by adding this language. It'll protect the folks who you have building in your floodplain, but you won't get a lot of credits for it because 80% of your SFHA is already under open space and only 20 is under higher regulations in activity 430. Now that's usually not the ratio. Usually the ratio for that is flopped, but you know, Accomack has a lot more open space than developable floodplain. So you'll never get more than 90 points for the cumulative substantial improvement element. But if you're tracking cumulative substantial improvements for 10 years for the improvement modifications additions, that's a 40 point. If you're tracking it for only 5 years, it's a 20 point. If you're tracking the repairs from damages, reconstructions from damages for 10 years, it's a 40 point. If you're doing it for 5 years, it's a 20 point. So you can potentially get 80 of those 90 points just by tracking for both improvements and repairs for that 10-year period. The ICC language is a 20 point portion, and the additions being treated as new constructions is also a 20 point sub element. So any of those adding up to a maximum of 90 points, and then your impact adjustment taken off of that.
That is not enough points. Right? That's crazy. That's such a huge that is politically so difficult unless you're Ken and you just sneak it in. That is so hard to get. Or maybe, I mean, right? That's the reason why we haven't done it.
It's probably easier in a community that it's not had a floodplain that's built out. If your floodplain, because you can make it start with a higher standard, but if your floodplain is older and built out, then yeah, that's going to be hard.
So hard. I mean,
it's really selling it based off of, if they're investing this much in their property, we want to make sure that they're going to be able to have it safely done at current standards, kind of a thing. I mean, that's really the argument that gets pushing that through. I know that in other states, they've had issues with communities having the cumulative language in their ordinance and getting credits for it. And then a hurricane comes and they adopt they revise the ordinance, rip it out so that all of those repairs don't have to be cumulative.
Yeah, that tracks.
So I don't know that they've put enough points on it to make it worthwhile, but it is one of those items that if you're doing it, we do want to give you some credits for it.
How do we petition for more points for this? This is crazy. We've got to do something about this. Has it come up in the CRS task force meetings? Do you know, Emily?
I don't know that it's come up recently, but I know that it has been pointed out in the past. I know that it's one of those things that we kind of have to look at both the track record of who's doing it. If it's in their ordinance, do they know it's in their ordinance? Because I've had plenty of meetings where I've seen it in the ordinance and the coordinator has no idea what that is. So they're definitely not doing it. So it's a two-way street. Like, if we want to give credits for it, but we don't want them to be empty credits. So if you can't show us how you're tracking it, we're not going to give you those credits, even if it's in your ordinance.
Yeah, that's fair, Emily. Ben McFarland has his hand raised. Ben, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, thanks. I just want one thing that occurred to me. I know there was a recent report either from the Congressional Research Service or from the Government Accountability Office that looked at the CRS program and made some recommendations to do some pretty substantial overhauls to highlight or to emphasize those activities that really were reducing flood risk versus those that could not be substantiated. And so there's, I guess that's all mixed up in the conversation about the reauthorization for the NFIP, but there are going to be opportunities to kind of put forward this kind of perspective. And, this one, when it comes to actually more quickly overhauling the building stock through the substantial improvement provisions, might be one where there could be more easily demonstratable benefits in terms of reducing flood risk. Just something to keep an eye on for the group. And we'll be following that as well and bring it up with our committee when it's appropriate.
Yeah, that's helpful. And that report was the CRS, the Congressional Research Service, their report, which happened, or they released it around the same time that the request for public comment or request for information was released in response to the updates to the NFIP, like the CFR. The Code of Federal Regulations they're considering updating it. We can include that in our follow-up email because it's really good. It's a good look. Okay.
If there's no more comments on this, we're gonna move on, and Mary Carson is gonna take the wheel as we discuss Virginia flood disclosure advocacy.
Okay, so it's everybody's favorite time of the year. The General Assembly is about to come into session at the beginning of January, and if you're new to the work group, we try to keep work group members informed about what's happening legislatively that impacts local governments in this space. So in the flooding space, in the kind of resilience / climate change space, anything related to building and land use planning, that kind of stuff. And so this is the first of a couple presentations or a couple slides that will focus on what people are talking about and what bills are actually advancing or failing, et cetera. So the timeline for pre-file is tomorrow. And by timeline, I mean deadline. And so everybody who is working to propose draft bills is scrambling to get stuff in the system by tomorrow. And within the kind of conservation / resilience community, there is interest in yet again trying to get a real, and by real I mean substantial flood risk disclosure law on the books. And Ben McFarland and the HRPDC have been working with us on this. And so Ben, please jump in at any point while I'm just giving the spiel. So the background on flood risk disclosure in Virginia is stuff that people who've been a part of this work group for a really long time will definitely remember. And I wish that Fred Russo from the city of Portsmouth was still around because he was a really big champion in this space. So in 2015, there was a big group of people, local government with Portsmouth leading the charge, and then kind of the William and Mary Coastal Policy Center, City of Norfolk was involved with this as well, their emergency management department. And there was a big desire to see flood risk disclosure in the code. And what I mean by flood risk disclosure, I mean your property, if this is true, is located in a special flood hazard area according to the FEMA maps. And if you have a federally backed mortgage, you'll be required to carry flood insurance. So that would be number one. Number two, that's baseline, right? Number two would be, and also, if this is true, your property has flooded in the past, and this is the amount of flooding that's occurred, the number of times, the claim amounts, et cetera. So we tried to get language like that, baseline language, passed in 2015. It was met with severe, aggressive opposition from the real estate lobby for obvious reasons. Now, 2015 was right after the bigger waters, grim waters, or the, I'm going to forget this acronym, affordability, HIFFA, AAA, I don't know, whatever that was, the affordability bill. And people were really struggling with the cost of flood insurance. Flood insurance was increasing. People would not find out that they were required to have flood insurance until they were so far along in the deal process that we were seeing deals fall through constantly, especially in Hampton Roads. And so it was, it really intended to deal with the burden on floodplain managers to deal with calls from constituents, calls from real estate agents who are frustrated by this problem. So we tried to pass the bill in 2015. It was kind of co-opted and revised to the extent that instead of disclosing the fact that properties were in high-risk flood zones, it made its way into the list in code of waived disclosures from the, or in the buyer beware section. So in the Code of Virginia, basically it says, we're a buyer beware state, and it is incumbent upon you, potential property buyer, to look at X, Y, and Z factors. And in that list, that X, Y, and Z, it's quite long, it's about maybe 16 different items. This disclosure or a waiver to disclose was included. So the language says something like, it is incumbent upon you, property owner, to figure out if your property is located in a high-risk flood zone. And if it is, then you have to do blah, 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 blah. There's a disclosure like this for, you know, whether your property is in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act. It's probably the best analogy. So that wasn't great. And it was a real slap in the face. And then in 2020, there was, so we're going down to the last bullet, sorry, it's ordered confusingly, but the 2020 bill was introduced by Congress Fowler, and it was a true disclosure bill. And it basically said, you know, you actually need to disclose whether or not the structure is in the floodplain, and that died in subcommittee. So then in 2020, we were successful in getting a flood disclosure bill passed. However, the bill is not that strong. It says if you have actual knowledge of flood damage to your structure, you have to disclose it. And to our knowledge, to our actual knowledge, this has not really been exercised or implemented. So it's something, and we're glad for it because it at least helps get people thinking while they're signing their massive, you know, packet and preparing to put their property on the books. But it's not that strong. So what we are trying to do is introduce a bill that is kind of the gold standard. So we've been talking with people at the Natural Resources Defense Council who have been, if you've ever seen their flood disclosure map, they're basically tracking all the states and they give us grades based off of how we're doing in flood disclosure. We've had an F for a long time, but because we had this new bill passed in 2021, I think that we're like a D or something, maybe C, yeah. But it's not strong, and we don't see that it's being enforced. And so what we are proposing is a real disclosure. Properties located in the high-risk flood zone, you may be required to get insurance. This is true for prospective buyers and renters, because it's really important that we don't forget the renters in this space, especially if you live in our high-risk areas in, you know, the urban environment where people have no clue what they're signing up for in terms of, you know, their potential loss of vehicle, potential loss of access to their homes, whatever during our nuisance flooding events. So I don't know what you all think about this. At one point, we have used like the work group as a supporter of this type of a bill. And forgot to mention that the Virginia Floodplain Management Association has also been working on this legislation. So Kristen, just like Ben, please weigh in as you want. But we're gonna be working this bill. We're gonna be supporting it. We'll work on if it's watered down, how we can make it less watered down, that kind of thing. So I'm just trying to get like a temperature check on the work group, whether or not this is something that you all would support and how that would even work given your local government legislative needs and your packet and all that stuff.
Mary Carson, this is Kristen. I would just add, I'm gonna send out a survey from VFMA to everybody, just asking like, you know, do you think your locality would be in support of this? I know like at Henrico, we are interested in this, and I don't know how the other localities do this, but like we get all of the legislative bills and provide feedback and everything to our county manager's office. We have a legislative liaison that works with the General Assembly, and so we provide comments that way. So if you all can just like maybe talk to people at your locality, or if you just already know, just be on the lookout for that. I'm going to send a survey, so it'll go beyond this group, but just to all the VFMA members in the localities to get a sense of you know, who might be interested, and so that you can kind of get folks on your end aware of it, so that if it does come across their desk during the session, you know, that they're not like taken aback by it, and that if they are supportive, that we can get some community support going through, so that, you know, maybe this can get passed.
Anybody else? I'm trying to find the list of stuff.
Mary Carson, I'll just chime in a little bit that, you know, for our localities that are on the call, you know, we're following this, and this is something that's been a part of our regional legislative packet for several years. I don't think we included it specifically this year, but it's something where there's been some broad support, and you know, there seems to be kind of movement with some other states to enhancing this, and you know, it's been a concern for us, you know, when we have such a transient population, that there is a lack of flood disclosure, of flood risk disclosure, of flood history disclosure. And so, you know, we're tracking it. I think, you know, we're going to be bringing it up with our legislative committee, which includes some local elected officials and appointed officials that are on our board. And we'll just, we're going to have some more discussion about it at our Coastal Resiliency Committee meeting on December 8th.
Nice.
Being that we are such a transient region of homeowners, how does a homeowner know, you know, that if they weren't informed before, if they've never, you know, if they're not, if the realtor didn't do a really good job, if they don't understand they're moving in somewhere never been in a flood zone, they don't understand all the impacts, and we see that a lot. How does that homeowner know that that's something that they should be aware of, but that's something that they need to pass on?
Well, there isn't a good, hey, this region's crazy, other than Googling it, right? I mean, if you like, what are the risks in Hampton Roads, or what are the risks in, you know, coastal Virginia, and of course in Western Virginia, there's a ton of rainfall risks and horrible flood risks now, climate change, and so there isn't. And so the idea is that this disclosure would at least open the door to get prospective buyers and renters thinking about the fact that, oh, dang, I guess we need to look at this. Because there isn't like a successful, and why it would be a hard sell. Like this campaign, you know, buy some boots. I don't know. It's not that exciting. Yeah.
How does the community when asked for this information, how do we provide information without breaking or crossing that privacy line?
Are you speaking specifically to repetitive loss?
I'm sorry.
Are you speaking specifically to repetitive loss properties?
Right.
I don't know, y'all do a pretty good job of this in Pocosin, I feel like.
Because we're not allowed to even talk about it. We can't, they don't want anything to do with, I mean, I would say to the poll, no, Pocosin would never support that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we say it's a repetitive loss area, we don't say it's a.
Right, we see, yeah, we can tell you it's in an area. But we designated the whole city as repetitive loss.
Loss, which I think is cool, and I forgot to ask, how many points is that? Like, oh, you can't go anywhere in this city without being in a repetitive loss area. Are there a lot of points for that, Emily?
I mean, we have a lot of areas in the city that aren't affected.
Yeah.
But we designate for ease of sending out information, because we had pockets that were scattered, and then we say the adjacent area around it, they overlap so much. And our feeling was that when we send information out, we send it to everybody. That way we're trying, we generate conversation even in areas that are in zone X.
There are points for targeted mailings as opposed to just a general countywide, so he's getting a targeted mailing
Generally.
out of.
And then he gets points for notifying, there are points for notifying every single member of your community about X, Y, and Z. So they're getting.
But you get more targeted.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yes, they're getting credit in outreach, activity 330, as a targeted outreach, because their notice says you're receiving this because you're in an area known to repeatedly flood. They've got that target audience statement on the outreach. And so those messages included in that outreach are worth 6 points apiece instead of 2 points apiece, which is what a general outreach audience receives. But it's not just credit for having your entire community marked as rep loss.
That'd be cool.
Seeing full results.
Ben, do you want to go?
Yeah, I just want to, I think, respond to some of Ken's questions. So part of this is, we know this isn't the only part of how we inform people about flood risk, but, it is an opportunity when people are really thinking about that kind of a big decision to have some sort of, requirement in place, some minimum level of disclosure that would really help to inform people when they're making these home purchases. But the other part of it is the outreach side of things, right? And so informing people, we're working on trying to enhance our regional flood insurance outreach campaign. We're supporting local efforts with that. We've got a grant right now that we're looking at identifying some specific things that we can do at the PDC that you all could be able to take advantage of, that would be able to convey, get people to be more aware of this. We've done some ads in the past. We're looking to kind of expand that as well, so that people are aware of it, and then they're better equipped to ask these questions. So it's it's a two-pronged thing. One is we don't want people to be, for lack of a better term, kind of getting away with, the premise of the disclosure of the whole caveat emptor thing is that that this information is available if you just look for it, and it's really not when it comes to actual flood risk. You can see if you're in a flood zone, but you can't tell if a property's actually been flooded, and because of that, there's a failure in the market to actually provide this information, even if people want to look for it. And so fixing that market failure is a big part of why we're interested in seeing kind of where this goes with the legislation that's being proposed or developed with the other parties that Mary Carson mentioned. So it's one of the things that we'll see how it plays out, but we see it as being just kind of one part of this whole effort to kind of get people more informed. And I think Pocosin's kind of a unique case study in that everyone that lives there, has been there for any length of time, knows the exposure of the community to flooding, but that's not necessarily the same in the rest of the region. But yeah, we're going to be talking about this again at our meeting in December and ongoing as well. And you can reach out to Whitney or to me if you have some questions about kind of where things are going. It has not yet been included in our legislative agenda for this upcoming session, but if that does change, that'll go through the normal process that we have, working with all of you to make sure that your concerns at the local, official level are noted and accounted for.
Pull up that.
Yeah, there's a second part of this. that-
Yeah, I thought that was required by state code.
Yeah, so, yes, so the second part of the poll, we're gonna leave it up in case you need to change your answer. I don't know if we're allowed to do that, because we put it into the same poll. Okay, so, as we were developing this language and the proposed idea for the new, the bill that we're trying to file, we came across this requirement, and this is something that I think Kristen brought up. And so Kristen, I mean, why don't you just say whatever you said to us about this?
Okay, yeah. So there is language in state code that says we as localities are required to notify property owners if there's a map revision. The language is pretty broad, and it's not even clear like when we have to notify them, if it's before or after. Do we notify everyone that has no change? Is it just an increase, a decrease? Like, what is it? I partnered with VCPC a couple years ago, and they looked into this a little bit more. I'll see if I can dig up their report. And they actually reached out to the patron that sponsored the bill, and we had a meeting with him, and he basically said, their thought process was that we could send it out with the tax assessment bills so that it wouldn't, be like an extra charge for the localities, but doing it with the tax assessment bills means that you might send the notification out like after the map changes have occurred, not necessarily before. And he said that they didn't really care either way. They were just thinking having someone, being notified at some point would be helpful. I don't know how many people are actually doing this. I know when I was at DCR, originally a lot of people didn't know this language was even in the code, and so I mentioned it to different people, different localities throughout the years. But I'm just curious if people are doing this, and then like my question for the disclosure language that I've kind of pushed back on a few times is like, it says that if buyers are aware, or forget the exact language, that they're in a flood zone, that they have to disclose it. So if we are actually all notifying people of map revisions, surely someone would be aware of it at some point. The problem is our map revisions are so infrequent, and our properties, are definitely getting sold way more than that it's not particularly helpful. But anyway, I was just kind of curious if people actually were doing this, because I know almost all of us are at some point in the map update process right now.
We did a postcard 9 years ago. I mean,
Yeah,
same here.
postcard, yeah, that's what I got. The language, actual knowledge, I pushed back on that too, Kristen, and evidently it's important for that to be the language that is used when we're talking about damage and claims. I don't know if you have to use actual knowledge about location in the flood zone, but it's when it's tied to money, insurance, the states are using that because of the protection that it necessarily provides.
And Mary Carson, one thought about the zone one, does that mimic the language that's in the code for the ACUS areas? The air installation compatibility use zones? That's one where there is already a disclosure requirement, and there are official local maps that have that information, and they have to be referred to.
Yes, that's a great point. So the language that we proposed is not intended to be the final language that is used in the bill itself or updates to the code itself. The legislative services team will draft that language, looking at the other provisions like the one that you've just mentioned. And so if the language is not consistent in the first draft that we received back from LIS, then we can absolutely modify it. But it's been explained to me that LIS staff likes to have the ability to make the language what they want it to be. For consistency purposes, exactly like you phrased. We just sent a bullet of our wants, a bulleted list. Anything else about this issue? I'm gonna end the poll. If you want CRS, CEC credits, please answer the polls. Okay. Am I doing this one? Reggie. Okay, so many of you, I suspect, have been following what's happened with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. There has been the State Air Board passed the regulation that requires that the state exit participation in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That regulation passed the board with some objection, actually, which is good for some of the board members, but it nevertheless passed. And so the regulation is moving forward, and what it will do is it will mean that we do not renew our participation at the end of December when we are supposed to renew. So the Southern Environmental Law Center filed an appeal to this regulatory action with 4 plaintiffs, so representing 4 plaintiffs, and they brought this action in Fairfax County Court, and the court. And the basis of their appeal was that the administration did not have the authority to remove the state from RGGI through an administrative action. The only way to properly remove the state through participation is through the General Assembly's action, so through legislation, which is how this group thinks that we did join RGGI in the first place. And so that's what they're claiming. And the Fairfax judge threw out 3 of the 4 plaintiffs, saying that they didn't have standing to bring the lawsuit. And in addition to denying the standing, they had to move venue. So they moved the court that's hearing the appeal from Fairfax County, which is where one of the plaintiffs that was denied standing was domiciled, and they had to go with the only remaining plaintiff's domicile, which is in Floyd County, Virginia. So now the lawsuit is in Floyd County, and the real takeaway here is the timing is off. We will not have a result from the lawsuit in time before the auction, before our contract with RGGI is up. And so even though there's disagreement about the way in which the administration is removing the state from RGGI, it unfortunately doesn't matter because the lawsuit timeline is not fast enough. So we are going to be out of RGGI for probably a year, depending on when new legislation can be introduced in the General Assembly, which we expect it to be in January. But there will be delay in when we get to participate and rejoin. We don't know exactly, but what we're anticipating is that we're gonna miss a year. So this is bad because that money is critical to the health of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. So this is a like wetlands watch. We need to figure out where we're going to get new money for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, so we don't lose the momentum that local governments, PDCs have been building to create flood resilience plans and then be able to access that money, project money. So this is what we're thinking. Trying to figure out if there's money in the general budget. So when the conferees meet, looking at where there are resources that can be allocated to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And then what about the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund? If RVRF is undersubscribed this year, and the applications are due December 12th, we're going to talk about that in a minute, then is it possible to move some of those resources into CFPF temporarily to bridge this lack of funding? We know that the CFPF is going to go to an annual grant round, and so it would only be, one bucket that would need to have this coverage. We're not saying deplete RVRF, because there are monies that need to be there to make it possible for us to access the FEMA storm money. But is there some wiggle room if no one is applying to RVRF? Could that be a possible location for CFPF, which we know people are applying to be used? So the administration has been silent on where CFPF resources are going to come from. They have not been silent in saying that it's going to go away. They say it won't, which is good. But we need some clarity on where the money is going to come from. Or just that it will be there, really, which is the bottom line. So, was I supposed to? Yeah, okay. Close this. Okay. So, I'm going to share these results. Let's see. Okay, so CFPF, I really did this already. Just to remind people, 45% comes from Reddy. Since 2020, 730 million. The application window closed on the 13th of this month. So round 4 allowed for 85 million in grants and loans, and we should hear end of December about awards. And this is just showing how the resources were available, 50 million for grants and 35 for loans for projects. So the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund, this is what's impending in terms of applications. 18.5 million was available, 5 for local match, 7.5 for mitigation of buildings, and 5 million in grant funding to help local governments or regional planning authorities to create programs, establish programs that will then allow for loan resources to be used in the future. There's also money available for very low interest capitalization of loan programs at the local and regional level, which is good. You can see this disclaimer kind of about what's available, who can use it. So for the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund, we're going to have a 2-page doc. This is a little bit delayed, but just that shows what could potentially be usable for the loan money. We'll of course know so much more once we see how many applicants and what the applications actually look like, which we'll know here very shortly. So we're going to launch a poll, but if anybody has any thoughts about this, we would really love to have your discussion. This says the poll has been launched in this meeting. Yeah, Ben, go for it.
Hey, Mary Carson. So one thing we did actually include in our legislative agenda for this year, or request that the General Assembly fund the CFPF. I believe the number we asked for was $200 million.
200, good.
Yeah, so, and also, you know, what an additional thing we've asked for is that the state come up with a dedicated pot of money to assist communities with matching funds for Army Corps of Engineers projects. The way the current CFPF is you know, designed, it doesn't really fit that program very well. And so kind of separating that out is that's the other recommendation. So we'll see where it goes. I think, you know, from our commission's perspective, we're kind of agnostic on where the money is coming from. I think, you know, we think the current CFPF is great and Reggie's a nice, easy source of funding for it. But, you know, as long as the money is there from somewhere, that's the biggest priority for us. So, and again, that was something that our commission did vote on. I believe it was either earlier this month or in October. So
Great.
and we'll also be talking about that on the 8th as well with our committee. So if you're one of our localities, you know, there will be more information then. It won't just be a rehash of what I've just been saying here.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Ben. Is that meeting in person or online? On the 8th?
That meeting will be in person.
Okay, great. Anybody in the room want to talk, you know, respond to this?
We want to.
Nice. For the loan or the, okay.
I mean, it's, yeah, we're not looking into that right now.
Okay.
Maybe one day.
Yeah. That's great.
Do you plan to apply for the RVRF funds?
Yeah.
Anybody, any thoughts on this? Are local governments concerned?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's great that the PDC is acting, which implies that local governments are concerned.
Well, it's like they really got everyone all stirred up to really come up with resilience plans and do all this other stuff. And I understand that was a different government, but still, you know, the state is moving forward with this, and then all of a sudden, so everyone makes plans based off of assuming there's a pot of money available, and then you're gonna take it away. So you're not gonna be able to do half the stuff we planned, you know.
And for Newport News, the investment in your crazy plans. I
Yes.
mean, just need resources to be available to execute. Yeah. Anybody from outside of Hampton Roads want to say anything in the chat or otherwise? We've got 2 RVRF grant, but only 1 community has applied for an RVRF loan. And just a reminder, please answer the poll if you want continuing education credits for your CFM. Does anybody want to say who that one person is who said that they're applying for an RVRF loan? I can, like, you know, turn off the recording if you don't. I hate that this recording thing. So helpful until it really is.
Maybe good odds.
Yeah, really good. We can follow up with that community or planning commission later. If you don't want to, just really curious about these resources and how they'll.
Hey, Mary
out.
Carson, I think
Yeah.
if I had to guess, I think Middle Peninsula might have applied for a loan.
Yes.
One of the issues that we identified and in the kind of the manual that was put out for the RVRF was that you already had to have a local program set up to actually like do that, to provide that kind of money or the funding to individual property owners. And that's a pretty substantial lift from ordinance adoption perspective. You've actually, your governing board actually has to adopt and create that program by ordinance. And so there aren't a lot of those in Virginia right now where communities provide those kind of loans to their residents, right? So we eagerly anticipate seeing kind of who applies for this and how widely, how many applications there are for the loan. I mean, I think they're more likely there's going to be some grant ones to set those programs up, but it'll be interesting to see how many communities apply for loans.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I feel like it's MPPDC's pick, right? I mean, they seem to be the only group that would be ready. Yeah, Kristen.
So we talked about applying for the grant for the revolving loan fund and then potentially the loan in the future. It didn't work out this round to apply for the grant because just the person in charge of the program went out on paternity leave. But I think we might try to pursue it again. And then what we were talking about was so that we could create like our own loan program for property owners, because we have a lot of like small private property drainage issues that we're currently funding and spending a lot of our time on. So I'm trying to see if it's feasible for us to use the grant to like push some of that off, so we're not necessarily doing all of the work, so we can focus on bigger projects. I've mentioned the loan to our leadership before. There hasn't, like, we don't really have any interest in it right now, but I don't know if that will change. We did just pass a $50 million bond, and so they're kind of like looking at things of like, oh, well, we've got money to do it all right now. We don't need extra money. But we are looking at other grants. And so I've kind of talked to them about this. Like we've got some very wealthy neighborhoods that they're interested in maybe pushing like elevations for, but which we don't normally allow in the county, but we would never be able to buy out like the $1 million homes in these areas, and they're not going to leave anyway. So that's one thing that we were kind of talking about, that the loan might be an option for, because it would be faster and easier for us to deal with. Like we would maybe look at being like a pass through almost for the property owner for the loan, for them to elevate their homes and do mitigation measures on it while we focus on the other areas. But we haven't really like fleshed it out much, so I'll let you know what happens with it. But that's kind of what we've been throwing around if we were going to use the loan. Otherwise, for like our bigger, more construction type projects, I think we would just use our own money or go the grant route, because, and honestly, I've been told like not to apply for grants because our accounting staff and everyone's just really frustrated with the time it takes for everything and the paperwork for all of it. And so I'm like not allowed to apply for grants unless they're a certain amount now because they don't want to deal with it. So
yeah,
that's one of our problems that we're dealing with.
Yeah, during one of our previous work group meetings, we talked about what the like amount of threshold is of grant. And that was several years ago, but it was shocking to us because we're like, we'll take that small grant, no problem. But it makes sense. It wouldn't be worth staff time.
Yeah, I've been told, I mean, it's not necessarily like set in stone, but I was just told if it's not more than $1 million, I'm not supposed to apply for it. I have applied for them smaller and have only gotten yelled at a couple of times, but I still did it. But that's kind of our threshold right now. It's it's flexible though. It's not necessarily like a real, it's just what our accounting told us.
Cool.
So this has already come up a couple of times in past work group meetings, but just to reiterate that these resources are available, low cost CRS online training videos and learning assessments, these secure CECs, and we offer a CRS introduction workshop, an activity 330 workshop for your outreach projects, and $450 for stormwater management. So Each workshop is specific to Virginia and highlights how you can maximize your points and get that specific activities, necessary programs off the ground. So this gives you an overview of what each course includes. For our introduction workshop, we speak about the NFIP and risk rating 2.0, intro to the CRS and how to join, and like a cost benefit analysis for your community. At 3:30, it's an overview of outreach projects and flood response preparations and PPI stakeholder delivery. And then 4:50, stormwater management. We're going to cover regulations, watershed master plans, erosion and sediment control regulations, and water quality regulations. So for any communities that are considering expanding their points in those specific activities or are curious about what it takes to join the CRS, please consider signing up for these classes. They're $25 per participant. You can get 2 to 3 CECs depending on what workshop it is. And if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to me. So this is one resource that was highlighted at the VFMA conference. In one of Emily Schmidt's sessions, she was speaking generally about the program. And Paul, Ryan, Paul's last name?
Paul Osmond.
Paul Osmond shouted out this specific resource after Emily was highlighting the CRS ISO resource page generally. And it's just a little 6-page guide. If we have any localities that are thinking about joining the CRS, this is a great document that dives into maybe 5 years ago, you did a cost benefit analysis and the CRS wasn't going to work for you. But this talks about, looking beyond that and taking into account, changes to the program with risk rating 2.0, your CDR may have changed. And I just highlighted a little blurb from within the document that, 150 communities that are participating in the CRS have populations of 5,000 or less. A lot of the people here are in the Hampton Roads and blow that out of the water, but many communities can benefit from the CRS and all of your policyholders will benefit.
Can I add one thing to that?
Please, Emily.
One of the biggest changes between if you did a cost benefit analysis before risk rating 2.0 and doing it now is that before, your CRS discount really only applied to policies in the SFHA. And now your CRS discount, whether you get to class 8, 10% discount, or class 6, 20% discount, that discount will be applied to virtually all of your policies in the program in your community. It will not apply to non-compliant structures, but that's about it. So as long as they're not in violation, if they're in your community and you have participation in the CRS program, they'll be getting that CRS discount once they reach the full risk rate.
That is a great point, Emily. Thank you for chiming in. And we love that that discount is expanded to, any policy holders.
I don't think that the population is a good thing to track it by whether or not, because, we have localities that have in them, they may have population, but they may have 8 policies in that community or something like that. So
Yeah. I guess when I'm thinking about the size of a locality, I'm also thinking about the capacity of that locality to handle kind of setting up and then managing the CRS program year to year. But you're right that there can be really limited benefits depending on the number of policyholders in your community. But we do expect that those will increase over time as we begin to see increasing rainfall events, especially in Western Virginia, and increased coastal flooding. So today, maybe they have 8 policyholders, but we hope that they'll have more as people protect their properties from flood loss moving forward. So another thing that was brought up at the VFMA conference, and this is a holdover from the last slide as well. This speaks specifically to your community's sub-dam plan and the credits that are on this. But speaking generally for the state, they will be developing a substantial damage plan that will apply to the whole Commonwealth in 2024. And another thing that will be kicking off is the DART, the Disaster Assistance Response Teams. And so Paul spoke to this at a lunch seminar at the conference. He was discussing that, you know, DARTs are happening in other states, either in affiliation with the state's chapters or with the state agency, and they assist local floodplain administrators by conducting flood damage reconnaissance, high watermark data collection, and those substantial damage estimates, training on code compliant reconstruction, guidance on mitigation actions, flood recovery, education for property owners, and if needed, they can supplement local staff in those, you know, large post-storm events where there's a crunch and you need support. And he also spoke to the benefits of a DART team in that it takes the pressure off of your community staff to be the ones telling, you know, their property owners, hey, this property is substantially damaged, and this is what it means for you. They can say instead, this DART team came in, birds of this, and, you know, this is their methodology, and defer to that decision instead of having to take the heat for that decision. And then ultimately, hopefully, recovery will move more quickly. And then for the state, the development of the state's DART will be handled or led by Angela Davis. We invited her to the call today, and hopefully she'll be able to come and speak more to this at a future work group meeting. But if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to Angela or myself. I will refer to her. Okay. So you can leave this meeting and go straight into an elevation certificate training if you would like to today. Scott Coforth is teaching, and it's available up on the CRS ISO trainings. You have to type in CRS at the top of the webpage. Sometimes people get hung up on that. They offered it yesterday, today, and tomorrow. 90-minute training on elevation certificates, the new form. And then this links to just a letter that covers the changes and new descriptions for your diagrams. Kristen, go ahead, please.
Thanks. I just wanted to point out, I put a message in the chat earlier, just an update about the elevation certificate. So I learned yesterday, if you Google female elevation certificate, none of the results take you to the actual correct elevation certificate. So if you Google it, make sure you include underwriting in the search, or just bookmark or save the file. There is a version, the URL is almost identical except for a hyphen, that is like it was one of the new versions, but not the newest corrected version. So if you look at the first page and it says 2022 on it, that's wrong. They fixed it to say 2023. And then also they removed all of the instructions from being visible. So now there's a little button on the, like in the upper left hand corner, it's a little gray button that says form instructions. So if you open up an elevation certificate and you can see the instructions, that also is going to be the wrong version. They did change some things in September, like some typos, and then fixed a lot of the formatting problems. So just wanted to point that out to everybody. Because I didn't mention it. I didn't realize that was happening when I did the training, if you went to the training at the conference. But yeah, I spent a good chunk of time yesterday trying to figure out why I kept downloading the wrong form. And that is why. So hopefully you all will save some time and not do it yourself.
Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, great comment in the chat. And Emily also dropped the link for the webinars, so you can go ahead and register for today or tomorrow's trainings for elevation certificates. So now we're going to go ahead and switch gears to report outs from communities. If anybody has any events or updates they'd like to share or questions. We can start with folks in the room and then move to our virtual attendees. Putting you on the spot, anybody?
I've got a question, and it's mainly for Ken, I think. I guess I heard there's what a USBC update that's gonna be coming out.
Mhm.
Do you know if there's anything flood related? I think the last update, our community found out about the flood ones from you telling us about it here in this meeting, so.
Yeah. I haven't seen, anything, related to that yet. I know the training is coming up and, it's set in person or, online. So even if you're not, in the inspection side of it, you can still go online and get the training out of it you need.
Oh. It's reversible. All right, anybody else?
Newport News, anybody? A person? You already spoke. Okay, we'll switch to the folks in the room. Virtually, I mean.
Please go ahead, Rich.
Thanks. For those of you who don't know me, I'm been with FEMA for over 15 years. For most of that time, I've been their insurance specialist. And also for most of that time, I've been the regional CRS coordinator. And I'm just letting you know that I'm going to be retiring a month from today. So this is probably my last meeting with you. Well, thank you. It's with mixed feelings that I do it. Been an honor and a privilege beyond words to represent FEMA, represent the National Flood Insurance Program, and it's just been wonderful to be working with this group and so many members that are there in the room today and out on the call. So I want to thank you all. If you want to ask my opinion on anything, you're going to have to do it before 29th of December. But if you want to know what I really think, contact me after. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, Mike, would you like to follow?
James City County has nothing to report.
Okay, thank you.
Just,
Anyone
we're
else?
looking forward to meeting with Emily next year.
Great.
So who is replacing Rich?
I was wondering that too.
So, Rich, is Bobby your direct replacement or will it be Kenya?
Good question. As a matter of fact, some time back, I turned over primary responsibilities to Bobby, but he's got so many other responsibilities and hats to wear. Kenya, maybe you can answer the question in terms of whether you'll take over the coordinator lead for the region or whether you'll just be joining in on these Virginia calls.
Yeah, I think it is going to be Bobby that is taking over for the CRS coordinator position, but if anybody reaches out to me, I can assist you in any way that I can, and if I need to loop Bobby in, I can always do that as well.
Ben?
So yeah, just a reminder, our Coastal Resiliency Committee meeting is going to be Friday, December 8th at 10 o'clock. It's going to be at 723 Wood Lake, and there will be an email going about that later this week. Also, the next Hampton Roads Adaptation Forum is going to be December 15th. It's going to be at ODU. Don't have the location off the top of my head, but there will be more emails going out about that as well. And I did see there was the comment in the chat about the funding for the CFPF and using that to match for federal grants. And that's one of the issues that we've identified as kind of being problematic, especially with the switch to the annual grant one. So that's something that we're going to be paying attention to. So Lauren, if you want to circle back on that, I know we have a good working relationship with Northern Virginia Regional Commission as well. Those larger policy issues, that's something that we're going to be paying attention to as well. So, but yeah, Rich, congratulations on your retirement. Thanks again for all that you've done for Virginia and for Hampton Roads and CRS communities down here, and many happy returns.
My pleasure. Thanks to all.
Well, I think you have another rest. Okay.
So we're going to plug the Hampton Roads Sea Level Rise Survey that some of you may have had emailed to you. A group of UVA and ODU researchers are conducting a survey about perceived risks of sea level rise and challenges, barriers for effective collaboration. They're looking for stakeholders in the Hampton Roads to participate in a 20-minute survey. And I'll include the email to that survey in my follow-up email to you all, as well as if anybody would like me to link to the events that were mentioned, I can probably find them. Otherwise, please email them to me and I'll include them. We also have the Hampton Roads Land Conservation meeting coming up December 1st. Is that this Friday? Yes, it's this Friday at the Brock Center.
We're gonna have lots of speakers here. Kathy's gonna speak, Ben's gonna speak. Who else is speaking? Maybe that's it from this group. It's gonna be really good.
We already covered this, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free to give me an email. Yes, Ken?
Okay, just one final point, a request for some additional information from everybody, if I could. If you're not aware, Virginia is the ASFPM Chapter of the Year, which is a great honor to have. And to follow up on that, and I know awards don't need to be done or won't be given out until the conference in June, but if anybody has any information, any positive words, I don't know, you can't have negative about her, but if you have anything positive, with all the years she's worked with us, she's helped us, she's given us unbelievable information. She's taken this work group from a very small group to an unbelievable group. Please send me anything you have related to Miss Mary Carson, so I can start compiling everything I need to submit to ASFPM for her to be considered CFM of the Year from the organization. And I'm going to submit that under the Region 3 Director's title. So any information you can get me will be greatly appreciated. I've asked her to do it, and she's very humble and doesn't want to give anything. So I'm going to ask everybody to send me stuff now so I can get it going. And then from the last point, if you need any assistance, I will again say Mary Carson is unbelievable for assistance. Savannah is unbelievable to help. BFMA has a great source of information, and Mr. Rich and his entire team in Region 3 have been unbelievable in assistance. And I say that from personal experience, as I ask them for assistance all the time. We are greatly indebted to all of those, but if you need information or help, ask somebody else to, ask your coworkers, ask your communities around you, but also ask those people. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Pat. And with that, we're at time. I'm gonna go ahead and, we're gonna chat. Oh. Yeah. All right. Thank you all, virtual attendees and folks in the room, for your participation today. It makes this work group what it is. A very important resource for the state and beyond. So thank you, and we will see you on January 31st, if not sooner, at one of CEDU's great events. Thank you. Happy holiday. Yeah.
Happy holiday.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, yes. So you